We're going to do something a little different this time. We usually do the offering, but this time we are going to have Reverend Mary Ann Macklin come up and do meditation practice.
I'm going to be assisted today in the meditation practice with my friend Count von Count. And I've asked Count von Count to make an appearance. And Count von Count, come on up. Count, I think you forgot something. You need to transform. One moment, please. Good morning. I am a vampire. I am Count von Count. Now, where's my paper? There it is. Have you ever been nervous about something? Well, Count, yes, I have. Well, I know how to count and to help with that. So Count, why don't you show this meditation exercise? Well, I'll need your help because I will do the counting. Okie dokie. So it goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Please repeat after me. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's not the whole exercise. Okay. Well, if I remember right, when you say 5, we look around and look for 5 colors, correct? That is correct. Settle down. When I say 5, look for 5 colors in the room. You can even look on your clothes. 5. Focus. Name the color in your mind. Next, when I say 4, notice 5 things you can touch or feel, like your bum on the chair. One of them is feeling the ridges of your fingers. Feel a piece of your clothing. You can feel the breath going in. Did I do 4? 4. And then 3 is sound. And now, I don't have great eyesight, and I know some people don't have great hearing, but you can do your own. You can put the little sound there. One of the tricks with this is trying to do the furthest sound you can hear, and then the closest. So 3. And you can even make your own sounds. Ooh. 2 is smell. Now, for those of us who have hair long enough, might be able to smell our hair. Smell the soap we used recently. Again, a piece of clothing, or just the smell of this room, which is so familiar and wonderful. And then what's left? 1. That's taste. Might be leftover toothpaste. Might be a little coffee we had. Taste. And what they say, if you are feeling a little nervous, anxious, overwhelmed, right, Count? Right. You do this, and slowly, your body will tend to get more relaxed and more focused. And I do this sometimes when I'm walking. I do this sometimes if I get upset about something. And I just go through 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I hope you will remember this little exercise from Count von Count, and may it serve you out in your life. That is our meditation exercise for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I like that. It really does work.
Yes.
It
my
really
goodness.
does work. So now what we are going to do is the offering. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. Okay. Now I'm going to introduce Reverend Mary Ann Macklin again for Neurotheology, Our Brains on Religion. Okay.
So for some of you who heard me talking earlier, this past week I was up at the lake, which is kind of funny because everybody says they're up at the lake in northern Indiana, and there's a lot of lakes, but everybody calls it the lake. So we used to have a 5-generation lake cottage up there that we sold in 2019. That was hard to do, but we just couldn't keep going with it. And but I have a friend 2 doors down who just said, our cottage is your cottage, and so we still get to go up there. And it was a very relaxing thing. And one of my greatest joys is to get up early in the morning, put on my bathing suit before anything else, and just go jump in. And I don't stay in long. I swim out until I can finally see the sun over the trees, and I swim back in. I'm done. But it's like a cup of coffee to me. It's just joy. So I had a lovely time. And driving back down, there was a story on the Department of Homeland Security about an operation called Operation Puppet Master, in which they were targeting any groups that were anti-ICE, labor communities, other community organizations. And what came about with that is all of a sudden they were talking about the Unitarian Universalists, because First Unitarian Minneapolis had been under surveillance with some of the groups that were coming there. So they actually had people coming in secret and taping things that were going on there. One of the groups was the Sunrise Movement. And there were a lot of quotes. I was here last night, and so I couldn't print things out. So now I'm going to get all technical, which I usually don't. But here was a quote from the senior minister at First Universalist Church of Minneapolis, Reverend Jen Crow. There's nothing that the government's going to do that's going to make us too scared to care for our neighbors. We don't hide the fact that we care about our neighbors. We don't hide the fact that we're not afraid. What we're doing today is consistent with who we've been for over 40 years. And this group would say 150 years. The UUA then made a statement. I mean, this is all on NPR. I'm driving down 69. Free societies protect houses of worship. They do not spy on them. As such, the Unitarian Universalist Association condemns the actions of this administration in secretly spying on at least one of our congregations, First Universalist Church of Minneapolis. And when we hear things like that, I feel it in my body. I felt it driving down here. So let's do the exercise one more time. I'm going to use this. 5 colors you see in this room, different ones. Five things you feel or touch. 3 sounds, which this may be one. 2 smells. And 1 taste. In the opening words that Stacy chose, it was calling what it means to be grounded here and now, because we then take in the wonders of life through all of our senses. And we also then move into a place where love is at the center, which is what we Unitarian Universalists strive to do. I think it's what Reverend Jen Crow, when she said, "We are not afraid," she was centered in love. So what does this have to do with neurotheology, your brain on religion? Everything, some of it. That exercise, that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When we focus on the senses like that, certain things happen to the brain. One of them is that the parietal lobe, which is right, like here, I think that's approximately right, it begins to just shut down a little. So that overall sense of ourselves and all the things we're always like, what's this, what's it, begins to relax. The amygdala, I think that's in the news a lot more. They call it the reptilian part of the brain. It's a little bit more than that, but that dampens our stress level. The fight or flight kind of lowers. Our brain waves go more from a super alert beta into more of the relaxed alpha. I think what the new one is rest and digest. It's more of a restful state. When some people, I would say when I meditate, I'm mainly in alpha waves. For those who go into deep meditation, they go into theta, which most of us experience in sleep. And again, it's a place where the brain can focus. How many of you have heard of Jill Bolte Taylor? She is a neuroscientist. She wrote the book, A Stroke of Insight. And she has, yes, a very popular, oh my gosh, TED Talk from way back. And her story is amazing. If anything from this service, please watch her TED Talk. And if you just put A Stroke of Insight on it, it's about 18 minutes. I watched it again last night. I always like watching it again. I'll say a little bit more about her later, but in that talk, and she's even going more into it now. So there's a TED Talk about that. Then there's a TED Talk or another talk called The Whole Brain, where it's updated, like 2022. She talks about the right and left side of the brain and how much the left side of our brain is, our words, our thinking. It's basically that part of the brain that isn't as much in the present moment. It's in the future, worrying about things, blah, 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 blah. What's going to happen if we do this or this or that? Or it's in the past. Why did I do that? Why did I say that? Blah, blah, blah. And so this side is much more sensory. It's taking in the world. So when we do something like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it's helping this kind of relax, and it's helping this other part of us connect to this moment, to be grounded in the here and now. Virginia Woolf has this wonderful quote. "I like going from one lighted room to the other. Such is my brain to me, lighted rooms." And I like to think of us when we're meditating, when we're doing that type, we're going to lighted rooms. And literally, when they do an fMRI on the brain of people meditating, this frontal cortex, the focus part for us, lights up. So go to one lighted room to the other. So that's part of this for me, is understanding, what is all this meditation and prayer or spiritual experiences that people have, and what does that have to do with the brain, and how do we learn about the effects, the development of each of our personal theologies. A while back, I received a message from a UU friend who said, Marianne, you may not know this about me, but I have been a student of brain function, and it has served as a foundation to my personal theology, such as it is. For more than 20 years, I have been fascinated by an organ that has the capacity to know itself. One thing I like to say is that every theory of reality is really the brain explaining itself using the metaphors of its experience. That's a long sentence, but that's what he said. But in essence, I think it is the explanation of our reality is our brain taking in the world and then talking to us about it. When I was in seminary, again, many, many moons ago, I was often known to raise my hand during theological discussions and say, how can we discuss theology without first discussing epistemology? And then my professor said, who let the Unitarian in? And these are these big words. Last time, I think it was about a month ago, I preached and I talked about ontology, which is a big fancy word for how do we think the universe is composed? What is all this stuff that we experience as reality? Epistemology is this great question. How do we know what we know? How do we know what we know? In the context of learning about our own personal theologies as Unitarian Universalists, I'm going to share part of my seminary learning. I want to let you know in full transparency, I had to go look this up again because I could only remember part of it. It was a long time ago. But basically, I was taught there are typically 4 sources which create the authoritative foundation of a religion or theology. So this is what we're taught. This is what our brains are taking in when we are taught about theology. They say there's scripture, the holy and inspired writings of a faith. For this congregation, there's some scripture right there. God is love. And how far back does that go? That goes a long way back. In some cases, there's the Protestant Bible, Islam's Quran, and that can play a central role of authority. The authoritative role is intensified in some religious communities when scriptural inerrancy is professed, like nothing can be wrong here. As Unitarian Universalists, we draw from many scriptural sources of the world's religions and other profound writings of women and men, many different ways we take in scripture. But I love that one too. Tradition. So we have scripture. That's an authoritative. It's one of the ways our brain goes, okay, religion. What do we have here? Tradition. Catholicism is an excellent one to look at the role that tradition plays in that. Any religion is. But I like it like confessionals, also the Pope. There are things structured into the actual religion that is part of the traditions. They may not be scripturally based, but they clearly inform that religion. Indigenous cultures often reflect a religious way of being, which has rich traditions and earth-centered rituals. And as Unitarian Universalists, our Unitarian heritage offers the tradition of oneness, Unitarian, and critical thinking. Our Universalist tradition speaks to the togetherness of humanity. God is love. The late Unitarian Universalist minister, Forrest Church, says it this way: to see our tears in another's eyes. That is universalism. So we got scripture, we got tradition, 2 more. I should have the count up here. 3. Reason. Again, it was Forrest Church who defined religion as our human response to the dual reality of being alive and having to die. That's how he defined religion. He provides a challenging description of reason, but I like it. It says, reason and rationality are entirely different things. Drawing from experience, Reason dares us to imagine beyond what more rationality might exclude. In a principled flight from irrationality, rationalists betray reason by losing sight of the trans-rational realm, the transcendent realm, the transcendentalist realm. And this is the realm of myth, parable, poetry, paradox, that transcendent realm that if you're going with pure rationality, you'll miss. So we have scripture and tradition and reason. And number 4, which I'm probably going to speak the rest of the sermon about, is experience. What do I experience as sacred? Each of you. What do I experience as holy? How does your experience inform your faith? What's a religious experience? You guys remember Andrew Weil? He's an MD who, I think he wrote the book From Chocolate to Morphine, and it was all about different levels of consciousness. And one of the things he says is that we humans have an innate natural drive to periodically alter our consciousness. Quote, most of the world's highest religious and philosophical thought originated in altered state of consciousness in individuals. Buddha, Paul in the Bible, Muhammad, Jesus, of course. And I'm sure there were many women out there doing the same thing that were not written about. That creative genius has long been observed to correlate with altered state of consciousness, a deep meditation, some type of intuitive insight or genius associated with anything from daydreaming, meditation, dreaming, from a prophetic moment. Non-ordinary modes of consciousness are involved in many religions. And he did talk about how, I mean, chocolate does alter our consciousness. It alters our chemistry. It tends to give us a little bit of a euphoria. Coffee, our great sacrament in this church. And all of these, I do think there is an innate place. And I think part of it is those parts of the brain I was talking about is shifting some things around in there and wanting to get to certain parts of that. So I'm going to go back to that neuroscientist, Jill Bolte-Taylor, in her TED Talk, A Stroke of Insight. In talking about the brain, she said, I believe that the more time we spend choosing to run the deep inner peace circuitry of our right hemisphere through meditation, through prayer, the more peace will be projected into the world, and the more peaceful the world will be. I absolutely believe that. And if sometime, I mean, I was just with family for a week. There was a couple times I had to go, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then I'd come back in a more peaceful state, and it shifted. It shifted, and it shifted things for me. It's pretty cool. Sometimes you have to go for a long walk and do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but it'll shift. Maya Angelou also said to be present in the present. That is the greatest gift. Again, in that sermon I did, I guess it was beginning of July or maybe sometime around in there. It was about a month ago, maybe it was the end. I mentioned that I had studied neurophysiology in my undergrad days, again, many moons ago. Studying the brain, where knowledge and experience are mediated, and I loved it. I was fortunate to be hired by the college clinic, and I worked with clients who had some type of traumatic brain injury, and we were an active part of their assessment program. We used this old test called the Halstead right hand, which I may have mentioned before, and it evaluated the entire nervous system and its operations with a wide range of brain functions: visual, auditory, tactile, verbal, spatial perception, mental concepts, attention, concentration, and more. And we could tell through this application of these particular tests what parts of the brain had been affected. I want to say I learned a lot from these clients, a lot about the tenacity of the human spirit, and a lot about the brain in its vulnerabilities and capabilities, as well as the infinite mystery and complexity At that time, we didn't know as much about neuroplasticity, that the brain can come and repair itself, or other parts will take over what that part of the brain was doing. Adaptive structural and functional changes that actually happen. Our brains can change, and we can influence that change. That neuroscientist, Jill Bolte Taylor, what happened is, here she is, a neuroscientist. She suffered a stroke in her 30s while studying brain science at Harvard. And I think she was teaching there as well. It took her 8 years to recover. She went, yes, 8 years. And through all of that, she was experiencing, it was on the left side of her brain, so she was experiencing this right side of the brain, which was just like open to everything. She called it la la land, you know, and it was wonderful, and it was oneness and a great peace. And so when she started doing some of her, all the different recovery things, it felt very shocking to her. It just felt like, no, don't talk so loud and everything. Remember what she said. I believe that the more time we spend choosing to run the deep inner peace circuitry of our right hemisphere, the more peace we will project into the world, and the more peaceful the world will be. And that's what she wanted to teach people. And she still goes around the globe. She was, I forget what year it was, but nominated as one of the top 100 influential people. She's won all types of awards, and she just took this amazing, actually when she was having the stroke, she was realizing it was happening, and she said, part of her was like, I gotta get help, I gotta help. And she said this other part was, whoa, this is fascinating. I get to observe from the inside this happening, which I think was just incredible. In 2022, I completed 20 years of ministry at the church in Bloomington, Indiana, and I took a gap year between my former ministerial position and a 2-year interim ministry in Louisville, Kentucky. I needed to step back. I need to be in more rest and digest. What I did do was take an online immersion program called the Inner MBA, which was sponsored by LinkedIn and Sounds True. The teachers of the program were neuroscientists, mindfulness practitioners, as well as groundbreaking CEOs who are redefining leadership, organizational systems, and functioning to create more equity, meaning-making, compassion, kindness, connection, creativity in our organizations. For me as a minister, it was heaven. It was lovely. Every teacher talked about the power of presence. And that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 was the best one for me to get there. We learned practices to help our minds, our brains change. I also discovered that there are many ways to do that, to find that mindfulness. Again, and I keep coming back to her, in her TED Talk, Jill Bolte Taylor talks about her transcendence experience during her stroke. And she said, when I was in only that right part of my brain, I knew myself as a life force, power of the universe. She actually felt that connection that big. So what does it mean to have a spiritual experience like that, a sense of transcendence, peace, to know oneself as a life force of the universe? That's what neurology studies. How does that happen? Some of these transcendent pieces can come through meditation, through music is a very powerful way it comes through. Creative processes, for those of you who feel like you're in church out in nature, that can bring that type of thing. Practicing loving kindness with others can do that. Recent research is starting to look at the use of psychedelics and using microdosing to find inner calm and for some transcendence. And we went through that in the 60s and 70s and found, here's the thing, for some people, it really does work like that. And for other people, it doesn't at all and can cause really critical and difficult experience. Not everyone's brain and nervous system is the same. For conclude, one of my most significant mystical experiences occurred not on top of a mountain or in a worship setting, but in an empty women's dressing room at the YMCA, probably about, how old am I, 67, 35, 40 years ago. I had just finished about 45 minutes of swimming laps. I had returned to an empty dressing room. It was in the evening, it was night. And I was walking across the carpeted floor to my locker. I was rather absent-mindedly looking down at the carpet when suddenly everything opened, and I mean open. It was like being super awake, even beyond that. It often says that mystical experiences are ineffable, and I find that to be true. It's hard to experience what was going on. The one description I read that came close came from Dr. James Austin, describing an experience which occurred to him while he was waiting for a train in London. He felt a sudden sense of enlightenment unlike anything he experienced before. He described it as my sense of individual existence, let's try the brain, of separateness from the physical world, parietal lobe, around me just evaporated like morning mist in a bright dawn. I saw things really as they are. The sense of I, me, and mine disappeared. Time was not present. I had a sense of eternity. My old yearnings, loathing, fear of death, everything, insinuations of self vanished. I had been graced by a comprehension of ultimate reality. For me, I had no idea how long I stood there staring at the floor of the YMCA dressing room. It could have been 5, it could have been 30. I don't know how many minutes it was. But it was true. The yearnings, loathing, fears, selfhood, time, separateness, everything had vanished. I was in an existential state of understanding it all, the workings of the universe. If I could describe it in one word, love. Just pure love, no boundaries, no time, no physicality, nothing. And eventually I thought about this, and I was thinking about my spouse, and I thought, I can't wait to tell Deborah about this. And as soon as I said I engaged that other part of my brain. I brought in my ego self, and it was like curtains. I remember watching it going, oh, there's three-dimensional space here. And it went like this, and I watched it come together. And there I was in the YMCA going, what the heck just happened? And I've been studying that kind of stuff ever since. Now, Dr. Austin says his experience simply proved the existence of the brain, and it prompted him to begin to study the biological basis of mysticism and spiritual experiences. His more rational neurological explanation for this experience goes like this. This is how he said that happened when he was waiting for the train. In order to feel that time, fear, and self-consciousness dissolving, certain brain circuits must have been interrupted. Activity in the amygdala down. That monitors the environment for threats and registers fear. It was dampened. Parietal lobe circuits orient you in time and space and mark the sharp distinction between self and world. It must have gone quiet. Frontal lobe, temporal lobe circuits mark time and generate self-awareness. Parts of those disengaged. And that's how he explained it. In the last few decades, neurotheology journals and abstracts have increased. There's much more about it. And people are saying, is this a placebo? Is this a different part of my brain? What's going on with all of this? The two authors I would suggest are Andrew Nuremberg, Why God Won't Go Away, How Enlightenment Changes Your Brain. He's the one who studied the Tibetan monks and praying Franciscan nuns and just saw this entirely different, with fMRI, and saw entirely different things happening in their brains when they meditated and prayed for long periods of time. And he associates those with spiritual experiences. They state that neurology can reconcile the rift between science and religion by showing them to be powerful but paths that cross each other. And the other one, I would say, Andrew Newberg and Jill Bolte-Taylor. And she has several books out. The first one is My Stroke of Insight. Everything we feel, see, hear, experience is mediated through our brain. But here's what I say. Does our brain simply create the experience, or does our brain allow for a perception of a deeper reality? I say both. Often, if you read about spiritual development, you will see embracing paradox is part of the spiritual journey. When we can hold paradox together, it will take us to universal love. Like Jill Bolte-Taylor said, I believe that the more we spend time choosing to run the deeper inner peace circuitry of our brain, the more peace we will project out in the world, and the more peaceful the world will be. And Virginia Woolf, I like going from one lighted room to the other, such is my brain to me. Lighted rooms. May it be so. May love be our center. And may you take this with you to take more love out into the world. And next Sunday, I'm going to preach about something.
Thank you. Maybe we can all use that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's sweet. That's right. And Insight on YouTube if you get a chance. Thank you. For our closing words by Ian Huntington Bear. You are in the story of the world. You are in the story of the world. You are the world coming to know itself. May you trust that all you will ever say or do belongs in the story of the world. Thank you.